Hi everybody and welcome back to part 5 of our flight sim tour around Iceland. We left off last time in Höfn and I've been intending to get this flight sorted much more quickly than I have done, but the reason for the delay between the last video and this one is purely down to the fact I was trying to do things as authentically as I could and use real weather, and on 4 of those flights it failed miserably. Whilst the weather on our leaving airport at Höfn was fine, the weather at our destination and halfway up to our destination deteriorated rapidly in each case, and visibility was 0, meaning all you would have seen was the clouds rather than the scenery, which is what I wanted to show you in these flights. So for the 5th attempt I flew with fair weather, or a version of fair weather, just so you could see where we were going. And the flight takes us here on the map from Höfn, where we left off last time, southeast of Vatnajökull glacier. We'll take a more easterly route up over Djúpivogur along the coast, Breiðdalsvík, where there's a small airfield where the road number 1 takes a left turn, and then we'll actually fly further north over Reyðarfjörður and Eskifjörður, which I'll explain why we've flown over there shortly, before ending up in the town of Egilsstaðir, which has a relatively largish airport. It's certainly one of the 5 or 6 destinations you fly to in a commuter flight from Reykjavik, and it takes you to the east of the country. The flight distance is probably around about 80 nautical miles total with the directions we're taking, and here you can see the road route takes you along and then in the fjord and up onto the high plain here, whereas we'll be following and showing you off the East Fjords here onto the east. So let's get into the cockpit and start the flight. So here we are on runway 36 at Höfn with the sun setting off to our left, and we're in prepared still. Prepared 2.3. I've just happened to be enjoying flying in the sim now since they've updated it, so the planned X-plane video that I promised before will come actually at the end of the tour, where I'll do some comparisons of the scenery in general. We're sat in a grand caravan from Coronado, and we can get off now, start increasing the throttle slightly and get on our way. Just get the maps and the system set up correctly. I enjoy this aircraft. The only thing I would say is it's slightly heavy on the frames and the systems. I know everybody talks about the systems in this particular software. Not great. It does have some glitches I noticed when I was flying. I'm trying to show you some different views with the EZDok as well, which, you know, has some limited success, but I'm glad I have it working in prepared now as we lift off. We'll take a right-hand turn heading east, trying to gain some altitude to get over these mountains on our right and start our trek into the fjords. The number 1 road is passing off, and there we will be leaving behind the beautiful Vatnajökull that we flew in from on our last flight. And here's the number 1 road which we've been following all the way. Trying to get some altitude here, make sure we get up and over the ridges up ahead of us. See a few of the farmsteads that are dotted around the scenery here again, totally accurate. Looks like we're just about going to make it up over the ridges. Taking a look back, you can see the airport in the little town of Höfn, just off the wing. A bit of turbulence as we come up over the higher ground here. Just jumping ahead slightly, you can start to see the East Fjords in the distance off to the front, and up ahead there's a lagoon alongside the sea there called Höfn, and has lots of very interesting bird life there. If you're into bird watching, I would imagine it's a very good place to go and view things. It's always been full of birds when we've been driving around that part of the country. But I just wanted to show you as well, again, the vector data that comes with this simulator, how accurate it is for Iceland. All these river tributaries here for this river that comes from the glacier, and one of the glacier tongues off just to the north. Looks incredibly accurate, and you can see it there snaking up into the mountains and back up towards where the glacier is. And visibility on this flight very good. You can see almost all the way up into, you can see up onto the highland actually. It looks great. I think you can almost make out the mountain Heiðabreið, which is miles away, and actually coincidentally that's where all the volcanic activity is located pretty close to at the moment. It's in the news. So here is the Lagoon of Lyon. So in a second you'll just see a headland off to our right where the road curves around and it actually goes up along a cliff face there, which is pretty spectacular. And this is the only place in Iceland where I've actually seen live swimming whales off in the sea. And that's just off around here, just past Lyon, that you can see here, off on the wingtip where the road curves around. And the next hamlet along from here, which we'll come across shortly, as we can see the valleys here that were carved by the glaciers retreating, which is actually the start of the East Fjords. But as I was just saying, the next town we come across is Djúpivogur, and this used to be an old colonial Danish trading port when the Danes ran the place, if you like. And it's got a nice little story attached to it, where it's the place where an ex-slave escaped and became one of the first people of colour in Iceland. A slave called Hans Jónsson, I think his name was, I haven't pronounced that very well. He was from Copenhagen and he escaped, and he ended up becoming one of Iceland's first people of colour, and in 1805 arrived from Denmark, born in the Caribbean, and he lived around this area as a peasant farmer and actually took over the trading port here in Djúpivogur, the little hamlet you can see. Married an Icelander, and today they have up to 500 descendants, which include the ex-Prime Minister David Oddsson, which is quite a nice story, I thought. And just off to the right here, to the south off from Djúpivogur, is a little island called Papey, which you'll see in a second, and that's been inhabited since the settlement until up till 1966, and now it's got a lighthouse on it, I think. But Irish monks lived there, they believe, Irish or Scottish monks. Papey named after the Papa monks. And there you can see the island that you see furthest off to the wingtip there, that's Papey. And there's a little joke, I don't know how true it is, it's a story that's been in my family, whether rightly or wrongly, that the monks may well be the cause of some of the red hair you see dotted around in Iceland. Well, here you've got a good view actually up at the fjords as well, and you can just see up in the distance there, Heiðabreið, there where I'm circling. That's a long way off to the north anyway. And here you can see one of the first fjords where the road winds in goes around the edge. And as I was just saying there before I noticed the mountain Heiðabreið, I'm not sure how true the Irish monk story actually is, but it's one of those things you get told as a child, or as a joke potentially, that there was a less monkish monk about who infused the red hair gene I should say, into the Icelandic nation, which is why you see the old red head dotted around in amongst the blondes and darker hairs ladies or men of Iceland. So we're just cutting ahead slightly now actually to the little town of Breiðuvík, and this is where the number 1 road stops following the coastline and darts off to the left and up this valley and up this fjord to go up into the highlands. I thought it was just worth showing. You can just see a little airfield off there to the right, which you can stop if you want to have a stop off on your trip around, a little mini airfield at Breiðuvík there, jutting out into the bay if you like. There you can see it a bit better. And there goes the road off up that you would follow, which ultimately ends up in Egilsstaðir. Follows the river up. I've only ever driven this road actually coming the other way, and the view you get coming around the mountains there and seeing the fjord before is pretty amazing. And Egilsstaðir is just up there off the wingtip to the north, and that's where we'll end up shortly once we flown around another fjord or two. So here we are coming up to the next fjord in front of us. This is the largest of the eastern fjords, called Reyðarfjörður, and it is a fjord with two forks. You can just see there in front of us and to the right. A fork that goes off to the left and a fork that goes off to the right there. And we'll just come down into this. This will be the last of the fjords that we fly up through before we head up to Egilsstaðir. We've just actually descended down a little bit so you can see, and we're heading actually up the right hand fork of the fjord over a small town called East Fjords, and there's a mountain just to the left here which overlooks and dominates the little village, kind of protecting it, sheltering it. And then this is the main arm of the fork which heads up to the town of Reyðarfjörður. The town of Reyðarfjörður grew, I think in the early 2000s it was, as a dam was built recently up in the highlands just nearby. Quite controversial for kind of locals up in arms, probably rightly so. Dam to create hydroelectric power for another aluminium smelter. You may remember in the very first video there was an aluminium smelter I mentioned up near Reykjavik. Well, they built another one over here somewhere in the East Fjords and dammed a river and created a large reservoir and electricity for that. So that's why the town grew in the early 2000s nearby. East Fjords here is the town you can see in front of us, and this is a small fishing village and is actually where my grandmother was born and grew up and spent her childhood and youth before she moved to Reykjavik in the big city, or comparatively big city. So I've been here once. I've seen the house where she grew up, still there, a very tiny little house, like a one up, one down. And that's just down here beneath us, and she used to walk to school every day. I believe it took 2 hours or 3 hours to walk to school every day from here. And this is East Fjords, far and nestled deep in the East Fjords. And overlooking it is this mountain here, Höfn I think it's pronounced. It's a really amazing looking mountain, like a big ship's bow, kind of poking out the land. So just heading inside here, I'm just going to double check we're all okay as we come over the slightly higher ground again. So we're just leaving the fjord just behind us, and Egilsstaðir is off to the right. You see a river there heading up towards Egilsstaðir, and Egilsstaðir is off to the right. You just make out the first lights there of the runway, I think. So what we'll do is we'll take a left-hand turn shortly and loop round and fly up the river and land onto the main runway. I can't remember which runway it is. Yeah, there's the airport there, the lights, I think. And the town of Egilsstaðir kind of is on either side of that river. And that's off to the far north of Iceland afterwards there, in that direction. So we'll start to descend down in a minute after we pass over this little ridge and follow the kind of mountainside downwards. I think this is actually what they do in real life when they come in, certainly from the south. The distance to the head there where we'll be heading on our next flight. Just bringing things round to get on to the final approach. You can see the view of the aircraft we're in. Incidentally, if any people have been watching the documentary Worst Place to Be a Pilot, they've been using the ground caravans as well in that flight, and well, I'm probably going to jinx things now by saying this, but we were both, myself and my fiance, sitting there watching. I was explaining how one of the young pilots on there was not doing a very good job and managed to bounce his way down the runway as he was landing, so I'm pretty much setting myself up for a fall here, I reckon, so we'll see what happens shortly. We're just lining up with the runway, looking at the river that comes up through Egilsstaðir, and off the wingtip to the left there are kind of similar. It's the high kind of plateau where a lot of the volcanic activity that's probably more behind us is going on. We'll actually fly in that direction on the next flight, going slightly north and then sort of more to the west again. We're probably about as far away from Reykjavik as we're going to go on this flight now. Over halfway through the tour, because most of the stuff to see is kind of where we've been. The next flight will probably take us back and do a little bit more of a detour towards the volcano again, where lava is still coming out, and show you what's happening over there, and also take a little bit of a northerly route towards another lake up there called Mivat. I'm just seeing if we can line ourselves up here. Getting there anyway, lining up. So Egilsstaðir is another small town. It's the largest town in this part of the country, and it was a relatively small town for many years, but then again, because of the aluminium smelter plant and the work done on the dam not too far away, it grew in the early 2000s, and a lot of people stayed up here. It was relatively easy to get up here with the airport and when the roads are open, etc. So it's a decent sized town, but really it's a big village anywhere else. So we'll just get ourselves lined up here and make sure we can get down safely. Let's check everything's right. Flaps down. I've not had much practice with this aircraft, which may sound like an excuse, but that's fine. I've got a funny feeling that despite me claiming that it must be easier than not to bounce things, that I'm very well going to do a similar thing as we come down. On the editing, I'll try and see if I can flick the cameras around to see whether or not we get a bounce. So here we can see number 1 road. We'll get back again, our kind of companion on the journey, and the easiest way to VFR navigate around the country. First bit of Egilsstaðir off to the right there with some of the small forests next to it. Runway up ahead, nicely established. Things made a little bit easier with the fair weather we have. Still coming down. Of course, now ultra cautious about not bouncing. We may come back to this real view on the landing, see if there is a bounce. Perhaps not, maybe I'll hide it. Again, the scenery here is spot on from Orbex. I mean, they do such a good job. I mean, bearing in mind this is an unknown country to many, this is what it looks like. Sparsity of trees and all that sort of stuff. It looks great. Nicely lined up, right altitude. Oh, the lights have disappeared. Let's get on the centre line. Cross over the number 1 road. Give a bounce. Oh, we bounced. Once. We did bounce. Well, we were always going to do that, weren't we? So, well, there you go. It is obviously a hard plane to fly. That's my excuse. So here we are down safely in Egilsstaðir. We'll just bring things to a halt. So just taxiing in now, with the light coming down, fading, the lights coming on in the airport. Hope you've enjoyed the flight today over the East Fjords, the furthest east that we're going to go on this trip. We'll be heading westwards now, slightly west, then north, and landing at Mivat with the next flight. And that shouldn't be too far away. I'll plan to do that in the next week or so and get that up for you guys to see. But I hope you've enjoyed this one and seen a bit of different part of Iceland as we continue the tour around. Just bring it in. Bring things to a halt here. Slightly out of parking position, but that's fine. There's no one else here. So, hope you enjoyed that flight, and we will see you again in the next one, where we'll take a flight here from Höfn and we'll head up to a place called Egilsstaðir, which is on the Lake Mývatn.